A queen, a saint, a revolutionary of Viking blood, Olga of Kiev is one of medieval history's grandest tales. Her path was not simple and full of danger at every turn. Welcome to Bizarre History. Today we look at Olga of Kiev, how a murderous Viking beginnings led to a queen and a saint. Born in Pskov at the turn of the 10th century, most of Olga's history is documented through her marriage to Igor of Kiev. Her Viking heritage is considered through her likely heritage as a Varangian. The Varangians were a subset of people located around the Volga River, who would have come from Viking and Scandinavian lineage. Though her Viking origins are of fascination to many, Olga of Kiev's story is essentially entwined with her marriage to Igor of Kiev, the powerful leader of Kievan Rus. Their marriage is believed to have taken place in 903 CE. At this time, Kievan Rus had been taken from a patchwork of different tribes, often at war with one another, into a potent principality. The growth of Kievan Rus was predominantly down to Igor's father Rurik, who is understood to have built the area and brought together tribes into a cohesive whole. Once the tribes were on the same page, Kievan Rus only grew in power and wealth over what was a relatively small time frame. During Igor and Olga's reign, the tribes did not sit still and unity was not held. While Igor was often warring with the Byzantine Empire, Olga birthed their son Sviatoslav in 942 CE. The good news was not to last, as in the years following, tribes that had previously made tribute to Kievan Rus stopped doing so. In response, Igor of Rus started demanding taxation from all non-paying tribes, a system previously abandoned. The friction began to exacerbate with a tribe known as the Drevelians, a Slavic tribe that had aligned with Kievan Rus in a marriage of convenience, as they both shared an enemy in the Byzantine Empire. The Drevlians were one of the first tribes that had halted their payments to Kievan Rus. Igor is understood to have been initially successful in confronting them and assuring they would continue payments. This arrangement, however, didn't last. Igor returned to the Drevlians and demanded more, for which he was brutally murdered. Historian accounts tell us Igor's death was a spectacle of horrendous violence. It's believed Igor was tied by each leg to a pair of bent-back birch trees. When the trees were released, the force tore Igor in half. Though the Kievan Rus society demanded that Sviatoslav succeed his father, he was merely 3 years old at the time. This left Olga a de facto ruler, facing rebellions that had just murdered her husband and king. It is the response to this murder of Igor that the legend of Olga begins. It is a medieval tale from the 11th century, and like many of its ilk, unfolds a grand morality play. The Drevelians began to start courting Olga and her leadership for their taking in the months following Igor's death. Olga was able to outmaneuver them at any and every turn. The first attempt to usurp Olga's power by the Drevelians was sending emissaries to convince her to marry Drevlian leader Prince Mal. The story goes, Olga greeted them with warmth and spoke of being pleased by the proposal. She told the emissaries to wait in their boats till morning, when they would be summoned for an announcement before all her people. In reality, Olga had dug trenches for the emissaries' boats and themselves to be flung. The result of this was the death of the emissaries. The Drevlians soon learned that their initial emissaries were murdered. This did not dismay them, and they sent another party of emissaries. This time, Olga greeted them and demanded that a bath be drawn for her guests. Upon entering the bathhouse, Olga had the doors sealed and had the entire bathhouse burned to the ground. It should also be mentioned that Olga did this before her people were even aware of what had happened to the first emissaries. For her third strike of revenge against the Drevlians, Olga used a method no less based on deception than her previous. At the site where the Drevlians had murdered Igor, Olga hosted a funereal feast commemoration of him. However, when the Drevlians present were drunk as skunks, Olga ordered her men to kill them. Completing her revenge, Olga gathered her people to attack Iskoristan, the Drevelian base. Her final act of revenge was no less reliant on deception and the illusion of safety. Olga's declaration to all Drevelians inside the city was their safety in exchange for 3 sparrows and pigeons from every household. Olga collected the birds and ensured her men tied pieces of sulfurous cloth to the birds' legs. The birds were then returned to fly back to their households where the cloth burned every last homestead to the ground. Any feeling the flame engulfed city were captured by Olga and her men, with many taken into slavery. Having subdued an uprising from the Drevlians, Olga went on to rule with success and peace for the years that followed. As queen, she was able to set up vital infrastructure for the region, such as a network for trade and increasingly central administration. Ironically, or poetically, she came to change the course of the very murderous uprising she had to quell. Olga's changes to the Kievan Rus tribute were the first law reform in Eastern medieval Europe. Her power and success did not go unnoticed by the surrounding rulers of the time. In medieval text, it is written that Emperor Constantine VII did propose to Olga and offered that they rule side by side. In a further display of Olga's cunning and guile, she turned down the proposal on the grounds of being pagan. In response, the emperor baptized her, which Olga stated left her more of a daughter to the emperor, leaving marriage entirely out of the question. Constantine is written to have accepted his being outmaneuvered, showering Olga in the finest gifts of silk and gold before her return to Kiev. The rest of her reign was devoted to her faith. Olga's principal mission as a regent was to spread Christianity among her people. Though not successful in converting her son, Sviatoslav was certain to make sure none were persecuted for doing so. Giving this freedom of religious faith and expression, Olga was able to build churches across Russian cities, famously in Kiev and her city of Pskov. In one of her last acts before dying a year later, Olga led a defense of Kiev from the Bulgarian army in 986 CE, while Sviatoslav was abroad, unable to defend the throne. Upon her death, Olga was a beloved figure across the entirety of Kievan Rus. She stands as the first woman to be canonized by the Russian Orthodox Church with the highest of esteem. The epitaph given to her was equal to the apostles, and she is touted as a radiant queen in the medieval texts as the primary chronicle. Both as a saint as well as a leader unafraid to wield their power, Olga of Kiev's story was immortalized to stand to the test of time. There are reasons to believe that the tale of Olga revenging the Drevlians has undergone exaggeration over the years. Or perhaps, more aptly, at the time, the writing of the conflict was scribed around 200 years after the conflict took place. Moreover, the records at the time should have been written by monks, and the church would have been funded by the throne. A further strand of this theory is the thematic behind the story. Revenge of a grieving family member, or for that matter, widow, is a strong recurring trope in Scandinavian folklore. Some suggest this use of heightened and thematic storytelling may have been used to elevate Olga as a founding figure of Russian Orthodox Christianity, as well as a brave and whip-smart leader. Other theories touted among medieval scholars show the tale of Olga's revenge as illustrating her turn from pagan to Christian. The brutality and revenge of the tale show Olga's pagan origin and her regency and conversion to Christianity, showing a different person after. This is backed by much religious text. A rebirth or reformation, if you will, of ethics and outlook is a common strand throughout Christianity and other faiths. The importance of Christianity is upheld in Olga's refusal to remarry any after the death of her husband Igor, espousing the value of fidelity in Christian teaching. There is much in Olga's tale that can be seen beyond the mythic revenge tale presented on the surface. Scholarly debate contends much of Olga's tale is to present her as a highly equipped political tactician. The continual outsmarting of the Drevlians in Olga's story is a theme intentionally presented. Following Igor's death, the control of Kievan Rus would have been up for grabs in the eyes of those surrounding it. Olga's actions in the wake of Igor's death had to be exact. The marriage to Prince Mal would have more or less given the area over. Even a semi-successful attempt from the Drevlians to counter Olga would have given inspiration to other tribe rebellions. Many medieval scholars believe Olga's entire campaign against the Drevlians was as much to repel other tribes as the Drevlians themselves. Olga's decisions as regent are worth studying as they make great strides in building her political capital. It's clear at the time Olga ruled in a society that was heavily favored and numerically dominant by males. The 2 times Olga is offered the hand of marriage to fellow royalty, she's strategic in turning them down. This is particularly true in her decline of Emperor Constantine's advances. At the time, Kievan Rus would have had an entrenched trade relationship with the Byzantine Empire. Some scholars believe that Olga's turn to Christianity was a way to appease both Emperor Constantine and keep all her political capital. If you want more of history's most amazing saints and revolutionary regents, subscribe and ring that notification bell. From us at Bizarre History, thanks for watching as always, and we'll catch you next time.